Go ahead, honey.
Well, good afternoon, folks. Old Buster coming to you again with another story this week. I just want to give a little shout out to my old buddy, one of the boys, Hard. He's got a little company called Doug Home Construction Company out of Lubbock, Texas. Best dirt man you ever did see. Of course, the boy's been doing it all his life. Anyway, this old story today is called Little Dub's Wonder Cream. Well, Buster hollered over to Walter, "Wake up, Little Dubs, whilst I get to shaking that there tree." Little Dubs is plumb tuckered out from running through that sawgrass to picking up quail on the knoll yesterday. That bayou flooded nigh on to 6 foot over her banks and left her high and dry, but cut off from the rest of the farm. Well, Walter ain't got his and dander up yet, but he will when you get to calling him Little Dubs, says Jesse. His and brothers thinks it's plumb hysterical. They like to fun him like that, you know. Their pa don't know they call him that, since it's a takeoff from his nickname, Dubs. It was just a wonderment to him when Ike, Walter's brother, told him that. Now, Walter's got his himself some stories too, I tell you, for getting into mischief, and even tells on his himself sometimes. What a trickster that boy is now. Well, Harris will make it back pretty soon when he's done fixing that trap he done set last night. He's going to skin that beaver tail so we can cook her up and have them quail eggs, and we gathered them up too up there on the knoll along with some quail. Well, Buster was getting the right persimmons before the coons and birds got to them, so we'd have some of them too. Well, anyhow, them boys hung on out there on old Indian bayou that run through Buster's grandpa's farm since they was knee-high to a grasshopper. There wasn't no place on that bayou and around that farm they didn't know. Well, all the boys camped out for the weekend, excepting when they went into town for the picture show to see Johnny Mac Brown and some cartoons and maybe a serial or so. They was a-riding in this here homemade contraption they done built. It was a sight, but it did run now. They got the frame and some old parts for nothing from old man Hired Nix, and an old motor out of old wrecked truck that was pretty weak but will still go for a spell. It's a Studebaker, you know. Well, all of Walter's brothers pitched in with the welding and mechanic work too. That horsehair seat wasn't none too comfortable, but a quilt that hung up in the back bedroom of Jesse's house there fixed that. Well, Hired's Paul had a transmission out of 29 Dodge flatbed that he let the boys have, and the tires was all 15-inch, you know, but different kinds. That old Model A frame was a mite warped, and she tracked a little east to west, you know. But it worked right smart. Ugly as all get out, but the horn was a cat's meow. Well, when Walter come across it, nobody'll ever know. He traded out of one of them boys out there at Tucker, I reckon. It'd play Dixie 1 minute and then give a good old wolf whistle the next. You ought to see them gals turn around. You could see Walter and Hired just a-grinning from ear to ear when they would push that horn button. Now, Jesse done got to being plumb famous like, so there was gals aplenty. Had to be dome off old Jesse with a stick. Well, gosh, a Friday just weren't no peace at all for him or none of the other boys wanting to know where Jesse was. Them pheromones of his'n was a wreaking havoc all over them women folk. And that's why they was a-camping out till Sunday evening late to get away from 'em all. The boys all got out of their chores somehow, but would sure enough have to make up the milking, though. It was good to have brothers and sisters, excepting Buster didn't have none. His and Grandma and Grandpa said to go on, though, since he butted them 90 acres of levees last weekend. Now, back to Jesse being famous and all. Well, Jesse was always into some kind of business, you know, and of course all the boys was with him, and even in this story I want you to know they weren't left out none. His mind was on that business all the time, into making some kind of money somehow. So he got into his and hayed that he could make a few greenbacks if he could sell udder balm to bald-headed folks. Not that it'd make the hair grow, but would make that noggin nice and soft-like, protect it from the sun, and was a skeeter repellent all at the same time with a bit of Old Spice and tonic smell to it for the ladies. Well, Jesse's ma knowed a lady from church in her quilting bee that had a sister that married up to a feller that had a radio station. Now that's how all this come about, you know. Well, anyhow, she got Jesse introduced to him one evening whilst they was on the way to this Wednesday night prayer meeting. They stopped at Cobb's General Store for some thread and whatnot that Jesse's ma had to get, and they met up with them there. Well, Jesse got to listen to them talk and found out where that feller'd be the next day, the one that had the radio station. Well, after school, he dropped on by and figured on seeing if there was some way he could get a little advertising on the radio for that there other bomb, Little Dove's Wonder Cream. Now, Jesse did call it Little Dove's Wonder Cream. That's right, Little Dove's. Reckon Walter would be fit to be tied over that one now. Well, on with the story. Jesse met up with the feller Mr. Beatles. Now, you know, Mr. Beetle also owned a little store where they traded. He done talked his way into giving him a percentage of the profits for the radio spot. You see, Mr. Beatles was as bald as a cue ball, and his and Hay needed some kind of hat. Well, Jesse done had him slather that utter balm all over his and Hay, and his and wife come in and took to it right off. Give old Mr. Beatles a wink and says to come on home early for supper. Well, that done it. Mr. Beatles and Jesse done struck up a deal. They sold that Little Dove Wonder Cream like who'd have thought it. Just couldn't keep none. One day, Mr. Beatles come in sick and was a sore throat and all, and couldn't talk none too good on the radio. So he asked Jesse to talk for him about the Little Dove Wonder Cream. Well, Jesse did all right, and then Mr. Beatles asking him if he would help him out later that evening with the music hour of record playing. Well, Jesse took to that like a duck to water. He got on that there radio, and Mr. Beatles done fell asleep, and Jesse had to pick out his own records to play. Now, if you know Jesse, you know he don't say much. But on that there radio, he was as smooth as silk. He played Elvis, which in his ma would have had a fit if she knowed that, and all them rock and roll records he found there in the booth. Now, Mr. Beatles didn't play nothing but country music and gospel music, and only had the rock and roll because somebody brought it by the station and left it there. It weren't meant to be played, you know. Well, the calls come in so fast from the kids and from them parts, they plumb jammed up the phone lines. Wasn't a party line at all you get in, and nobody could get through. When Jesse went to school, the gal just swooned and chased after the boy something fierce. Twixt his record playing and them pheromones, there tweren't no quit in them. Even old Willie Jessup was still out there haunting the boy. Well, Mr. Beatles was sure enough in a pickle now. Some folks was a-fuming over the rock and roll, and some was a-having a fit to hear some more. They all wanted more of that udder bomb, and it got so a feller couldn't buy none nowhere. The preacher was a-spouting devil music from the pulpit, and the youngins and the businessmen was a-wanting more rock and roll. It was a-making some folks a heap of money, and poor Mr. Beatles had his and wife mannered to wet in. No amount of udder bomb would soothe their feathers, that's for sure, I tell you. Now, Mr. Beatles weren't mad at Jesse none, but he just had to figure a way out of this here fix. They just had to put on their thinking caps. Where Buster, Walter, and Hired met up with Jesse at the back of Leak Soda Fountain at the drugstore and took to discussing this here predicament of Jesse's. Walter says to Jesse, "Jesse, that Little Dove done come from my brothers, didn't it?" Jesse told Walter it sure enough did, and it was a right catchy handle for his and Creme. Well, Walter said he didn't care much for the name, but if it put some hard cash in his pockets, it'd be okay. All the boys just laughed about that, you know. He knew he was going to get teased for sure. Walter said all the bald-headed folks in them parts sure liked it and was just a raving about how good it was. Walter said he knowed something or another about all that because he tried something like that one time too. He told the boys if they didn't remember when he was playing football. Well, all the boys on the team was getting their burr haircuts, so they all got on to Billy Dan Hughes because he had them long curly locks and wouldn't go getting no haircut. Well, they got old Billy Dan down and they took some sheep shears and put a racing stripe right down the middle of his head. He had fire in his eyes over that, you know. But Walter told him how to make it grow out real quick like. He told Billy Dan to put some mustard on his head and rub it in real good. Guess it must have worked because it growed out pretty good, just took a while. He wasn't a mess. Well, that night Walter come up with the idea to just take a little trip and let things settle down a mite. Seeing as how there was a rodeo up in Wyoming he wanted to go to, he figured now was as good a time as any. A whole passel of the boys wanted to go too, so they made up to go the next evening after chores. Well, it being Friday night and all, and their hair was getting a little kinky, so the hair of the dog it was, white lightning and blue moon or liquor or grandma's medicine, whatever you want to call it. All them boys was sure enough lit up like a Christmas tree. They was gathered out there by the apartment house where a bunch of gals they knowed was a-living there. The gals was a-working for a company out of Dallas that did some kind of government work, and they was put up there for 6 weeks, and then the job ended. But they was still there for a little bit. All the boys was a-hooting and a-hollering, and a few of the rowdy gals, of course they had some of them Texican old tall gals there that rowdy as you could be. Somebody done called the police, and all the gals run off to their apartments, and the boys all just hung around there for a spell. They was just having some fun till the local constabulary drove up. Well, a few of the boys teased a bit just to fun until the police lined them all up and was about to arrest them all. Well, about that time, Walter and Jesse come along and see what all was a-happening. He told Jesse if the boys got took to jail, they couldn't go on their trip. They just had to do something about it all. Well, Walter's friend and cousin, that's old Manly Britton, done eased up alongside Walter and asked him what all the doings was all about. Now, them boys, let me tell you, if there's anybody in the mischief, them boys was. Well, Walter told Manly what all was going on, and then they made up a plan to get all of them loose. Well, Walter told Jesse to hightail it back to Buster and Hired and get Buster's Ford ready to go right now. They wasn't waiting till morning to leave. Well, Jesse took off like a scalded dog, and Manly jumped up on the police car and started jumping on it and kicking out the light and whatnot, and them blue lights was a-whirling. But Manly just couldn't make no headway. He's a little feller, you know. So Walter jumped up on the hood and then on the roof and kicked him plumb off in the car. Well, them officers seen that and took to running to catch Walter and Manly. With all the chasing and all through the backyards and alley, them officers plumb forgot about the rest of the boys, and they scattered and skedaddled all over them hills. And there one of them was caught. They got word and met on up with Buster and Hired and Jesse to light on out of there. Now, Walter and Manly went through downtown in an alley and jumped in a dumpster. The police were running by, looking everywhere, but just couldn't find them two boys what was destructing their car. Well, after the police was long gone, Walter and Manly peeped over the top of that dumpster just a-grinning. Walter said to Manly, "Wonder who they's looking for," and went to caterwauling till both of them teared up a-laughing so hard they couldn't walk nor talk. Well, the police never did get a good look at who done it, so Walter and Manly got away clean. They just hooked up with Buster and the boys and took on off to Wyoming to that rodeo. Well, the boys come on back late Sunday evening and had about 3 hours sleep. Didn't make no never mind, no, to them since they took turns of driving and slept a mite in the truck. Boy, howdy, it was rougher than the cob at the house for Jesse when he got on in there now. His mama done told him that he was the talk of the town playing out there rock and roll. That music got everybody turned on their ear, and he just had to quit that. She knowed the devil done made him do it, and there just wasn't no way to get her to understand how they liked that there new kind of music. Well, Jesse's pa never said too much, but he told Jesse to come take a ride with him. He told Jesse he kind of liked that new music too, but just couldn't afford to say nothing about it around his ma. He told Jesse just to quit for now at the radio station, and he would help him with getting his and Little Dove's Wonder Cream made and sold. They'd go on Saturdays and to all the little towns within 50 miles, to every barber shop and tonsorial parlor and five and dime till they got orders, and then he'd help Jesse to get all the makings to fill the orders. Well, Jesse's pa told him he was right proud of him, and things would smooth on out in a while, and he could do as he pleased when he got a little older and growed up a mite. Well, Jesse and his and pa went on home to bed, but before he jumped in there, he told his and ma he was quitting the radio station. She just smiled and hugged little Jesse and told him she loved him and kissed in his little forehead. Well, round about midnight, they all heard a fire bell a-clanging. Seems the radio station done caught a fire and everybody come a-running. Well, when the Groom Volunteer Fire Department got there with the high sheriff in tow, The crowd was already growing but helping too. Come to find out that old Erasmus Hatfield was at his and Blackbeard's shop next door to the radio station. He was working late on an order for a farmer down Plum Bayou, down by Peckerwood Lake. Now, Mr. Hatfield had his mule in the north stall by the wall of the radio station and had 2 coal oil lamps burning for a little light in the back. Well, when he was hammering, steel sparks took to flying from some of the pockets in the metal. Them sparks flew high and wide, I tell you, and lit right on the nose of that mule. Well, he started braying and bucking and kicking and passing gas. That mule kicked the stall so hard he knocked off the coal oil lamp and it caught dry tinder fire. Old wood and hay went up so fast old man Erasmus Hatfield just couldn't put it out. The fire took hold of the radio station and it started burning something fierce. They just couldn't get it put out in time to save the radio station and equipment. Well, Mr. Beatles was sure down in the mouth about it all, but all was not lost. The insurance man come round and paid him a right smart handsome price for the building and equipment and lost time and wages to boot. Well, Mr. Beatles come out real good on that deal, and him and his wife just up and moved to Memphis to bigger and better things. That's where the blues and Elvis come from, you know, and he knowed a feller there named Mr. Phillips. And he had a radio recording studio over there that he could go in with him on. Well, all the town folk was real glad that rock and roll was gone forever. The side of the building was cleaned up and a little park was put in there for the town. Jesse and his and Paul made and sold Little Dub's Wonder Cream till one day a feller from New York come by and said he'd buy out Jesse. Well, Jesse took him up on the offer 'cause he done had another ID and just couldn't wait to get the boys on it with him. Well, Jesse, folks put some money away for him and bought some kind of stock in a newfangled gadget called a computer. They was a thinking of his in future 'cause Jesse done knowed he wanted to take up lawyering when he got growed. Well, the boys will meet up at the ice cream social on Thursday night and hash it all out then. For them boys, it was all for one and one for all.